All right, well, I'm Edd Sorenson. I own Cave Adventures. I'm a cave diving instructor. I'm a cave diving instructor trainer and an instructor trainer examiner. So I teach anywhere from diving cavern all the way up to CCR instructor training. I was also in the 90s when Henry Nicholson started the IUCRR, which is the International Underwater Cave Rescue and Recovery Team. And he wanted someone from every state, so a regional coordinator and recovery divers. Well, at the time I was living in Portland, Oregon, and a really good friend of mine who was actually my Trimix instructor way back then, we dove a lot together. He was also a cave diver, and he'd been cave certified, I think, before I was. And he was asked to be the regional coordinator. At that time, I mean, that was a long time ago, there was hardly any cave divers in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, California. And so he was asked to be the regional coordinator for Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and I think maybe California. Anyway, so he said, all right, how many people should I have, and who picks them? And he said, sure, team, you pick them. And there was only 3 cave divers that I knew of in Oregon, and they were all friends of mine. And Jeff called me and asked if I would do it, and I said yes. And he just said, it's going to be you and I, and which kind of offended apparently the other 2 cave divers, and they expressed it quite vocally. But I think we only got called out once for a mine rescue, and we got gear packed and all the way to the airport, and then we're at the airport, tickets in hand, and they told us to stand down, that they'd got them out. And then I think 1999, might have been 2000, I was in Florida for a couple weeks of cave diving, and I'd come down 3 or 4 times a year, and twice a year to Mexico. And we were at Jenny Springs, and we had scooters and stages, and we were getting ready to go on a dive. And my buddy was still down. His scooter and stage were kind of negatively buoyant, and they were at the bottom of the stairs. So he's down there clipping off his stage and his scooter. And I'm at the top talking to this guy that used to own the dive shack, Terry Burgess, and he was now working for Jenny Springs. And we were just sitting there chit-chatting, waiting for my dive partner, and all of a sudden I hear, help, help, help. And I look over, and there's a guy, and he said, help my wife, help my wife. So I went in, and that ended up being my first body recovery while I was on vacation. So that's kind of where it started. And then later on, I did, after I moved here in 2000, I bought that place in 2002. After I moved here, I did quite a few body recoveries. And then there was an incident in Tallahassee, and the IUCRR usually calls whoever's closest. And there was several cave divers in the Tallahassee area. One of them was Jeff Bauer, who was at the time the president of the NACD. And good diver, we used to dive a lot together on the Indian Springs project, deep diving. And so he went out, he found the victim, but it was a little bitty hole, and all he could see was the guy's torso. And the guy's head was stuck on the other side of this hole, and his leg was stuck at the bottom. And he had rigor mortis already set in. So he did as much as he could do until his tanks were getting low, and then he came out, and the sheriff's department said, did you find him? Yep. Where is he? He's still in there. He goes, all right, what do we need to do to get him out? And he goes, he's not coming out. He's stuck, and he's rigor mortis up. There's nothing we can do. And he said, well, we got to get him out. What do we do? He goes, it's impossible. His head's stuck here, and his foot and his leg's stuck down here, and they're only that far apart. And he said, I even took my fins off, because there's a tube about this big that goes up about a body length, maybe a little longer, to this little teeny complete gear off restriction. The guy had apparently taken he was an open water diver, took his open water BC off, put it in front of him, and going through the hole, I surmise, I wasn't there, I surmise that he let go of it because I found it on the other side of the room. But he keeps telling the sheriff it's impossible. There's no way in. So they send him in again. He does another dive. And he tried going into this tube feet first with his fins off, trying to shove the guy out of the way. No luck. So he could see this much of his torso and one of his wrists. And he ended up tying a reel to the kid's wrist. Here's where he's at. And he left. And the sheriff's department just kept asking, what do we do? What do we do? And he said, I told you it's impossible. He said, the only thing you could do, he said, there's really not enough cave here to worry about it. It was like one room. He said, I just dynamite the thing shut and that's his tomb. He said, or we could leave him in there for a couple months until he starts to soften up and bring him out in the pieces. And they're like, yeah, that's not going to work. So he said, what do we do? And Jeff kept saying, I've told you 6 times, it's impossible. And he goes, there's got to be somebody we can call. And Jeff said, well, there's only one person I know that's crazy enough to even attempt this. I'll give him a call. So he called me up, tells me the story. And I was in Orlando. I had just flown a friend of mine that's the fire chief in town. They had a chiefs convention down in Orlando. And so I had flown him down for his chiefs convention, and I was just fueling my plane, getting ready to come home. And I had a buddy of mine from Texas with me, also a cave diver. So he tells me the story, and I said, all right, I'll get my gear together, and I'll be out there tomorrow. And so I go in, and I see the same thing Jeff saw. It's impossible. And I'm trying to see how bad he's stuck, but I can't see. It's the hole's so little, and he is so stuck. And so then I'm looking for alternates, and I'm thinking there's a big rock right here. And then I'm looking around what little bit I could see around his body, and I thought, if I could get this rock out of there, then I could sneak in, I could take off all my gear and sneak in behind him and then get the body out, get it unstuck. So I come out, and I'm telling, now 2 guys had volunteered to come with me that both live in Tallahassee. They'd both been to this cave, and this Wassissa River had a lot of caves, and they were all just little nothings. And one of them, the biggest one of the bunch, was called Cassidy, I believe. And 2 divers just before that they were attempting to go in, and a lot of this stuff's all breakdown. And it collapsed on this girl, and the other guys that's with her is like 6'4" and 270, and he just yarded her out of this rubble pile. Otherwise, she'd have perished. Anyway, they offered to go with me. They were both IUCRR divers, and I said, I don't take anybody on a body recovery. I do them by myself. And then I started thinking, I've never been there. Jeff says how bad it is. So I said, you could go along as surface support and logistics. And so they said, fine. They said, we're going to bring our dive gear just in case. I said, all right. So I come out, I tell the sheriff's department what I saw. I said, I'm going to need a pry bar. And I said, maybe a big one, a short one. I don't know what I'm going to need. And Matt's like, no, do not do that. This is all breakdown, Ed. He said, look what happened to Cassidy a couple of months ago. He said, try and move one rock, this whole thing can collapse and kill you. Well, the sheriff's department heard, pry bar, this guy's going to get us out. So they zoom away on the airboat, zoom back, and they had a whole bucket. Must have been 40 pry bars in there. There was pry bars of every flavor. And then one big Johnson bar, 5-foot Johnson bar. So I went in there. Now, I was told up front how bad this was, so I took 2 little LP50s. Well, actually, I took 4 of them, in case I needed to do multiple dives. And a little webbing harness, my no-mount harness, so no wing, nothing. So I go down there, and Matt says, I'll go with you to make sure this thing doesn't collapse on your head. So I'm laying in this tube trying to work this giant 5-foot Johnson bar in this little teeny tunnel. And every time I'd get that rock to move even a millimeter, a bunch of crap would just blow into my face. There was a tremendous amount of flow in this cave. And as soon as I get this thing to move a little bit, it's just zero viz, and I just hit the deck, and I'm like, oh God, don't let me die. And it clears up. I'm like, okay. I grab the bar. I'm like, you good? Yeah, he left. He was gone. He was in the wind. So I'm down there prying, and I'm working, and it's just not going the way I planned. And all of a sudden, I feel this rock move. Now, I knew from looking in there, it just dropped off. So I thought if I can get it to move the slightest amount, it's just going to roll down the hill into this big pit. And all of a sudden I feel, and the bar falls down and shit's blowing in my face. And I thought, I did it. And so I'm just sitting there, oh, please don't let me die. And it clears up, and I look, and the guy's gone. The rock pivoted. It didn't move, it pivoted. And now it's blocking. I can see his hand and the sliver of him. And I'm like, oh, what did I do? And now I can't get the rock to move at all. That's its new location. And I'm like, oh, what did I just do? Now there's zero chance of getting him out. So I exit the cave, and I'm on the boat. By this time, I've already done like 4 dives, and it's past lunchtime. We started crack of dawn. And I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm mentally and physically beat down, especially after I just screwed up royally. And I'm just in my own head trying to think what's next, because I just can't give up. And the sheriff's department, we got pizza coming, great. And they're like, blah, 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 wanting to know. I said, I don't know, just leave me alone. And I'm thinking. And then I looked to Chris and Matt, and I said, is there any other way in? No. They've sketched this, surveyed it, mapped it, and they said there's a little teeny mailbox-like slot that Ryan went in. And Ryan was this nice kid. I remember when he first learned to cave dive, but he was only about 5'6" and about 80 pounds. I mean, he was a stick. And he said, there's no way you're going to fit in there. And at the time, I was, 220. And so I thought, well, I got to find another way in. So I go back in, and I'm looking all around, and I see this little slot, and I try and go in there. There's no possible chance. It's just way smaller than I am. And finally, at the top of this breakdown pile, I see the ceilings here and the breakdown rocks here. And I get up there, and I got my face jammed against the rocks, and I can see I can get in right here. And so I can't get in, so I took off all my gear, and I'm dangling it over the edge of this rock. Now, if I drop it, I'm going to die. So I'm trying to hold on to this, and I'm wiggling, and I wiggle, and I wiggle, and all of a sudden I plop through the other side. Now I'm sailing for the bottom because I don't have a wing on this thing. Now I get all my gear back on, grab my reel, and I start going, and I find him. I come in behind him, and his knees are bent here, and his upper leg and torso are straight. So he's like kneeling on the bottom. And then his head, apparently when he lost his BC, he had a headlight on, which I found at the bottom of the pit. When he turned around, somehow he lost that headlight fell down the bottom of the pit. So he's now in the dark, trying to find this little hole to get out on one breath. And he missed the hole here and found this crack up here. And he, in a panic, he's determined he's going to shove his way through this crack, and his head's wedged. I mean, that crack's probably only 5 inches, and he's got his whole head. I mean, it's like it's in a vice grip. And there was there was boulders on the floor, and there was a little gap between the boulders, and he was pushing so hard to shove his head through that his leg went between these boulders. So that's how his leg was stuck down here and his head was stuck up there. So it took me quite a while to get his body out of this crack. And then, of course, I don't have a wing on, so we're both sailing for the bottom, and I'm holding him, I always try and bring him back in as intact as I can. So I lay him on the bottom, I get out. Now I came up with an idea to design a harness that had a loop here, around the arm, back to the loop, around this arm, back to the loop, so that I could get these guys to help me. And this mailbox slot's about this far, so I leave the body on the bottom. I go out, I get the sheriff's department to get me a bunch of webbing, I make this harness. Now I've got these two guys gearing up. I said, I'm gonna need you to help me. You'll just be in the cavern area. I'll throw this thing through. You'll pull when I tell you to pull, and I'll be inside tucking and shoehorning and pushing. And I said, I think we can get him out. So they both say, okay. We go in, I get the harness made, get him all rigged up, throw it through the hole, and there's a little crack next to the hole where I can see them. I can just barely see them. And so I'd take my reg out, pull! And they'd start pulling, and they got their legs up again, they're pulling on the strap, and I'm in there tucking and shoehorning and pushing and kicking, and he's going. And I put him in upside down. And I had told the sheriff's department, he's rigor mortis up. And so when we get to this slot, I'm gonna have to break his arms, because I'm supposed to tell them if I have to mutilate them in any way. So we get to here, and it's this horrific sound. And then I'm like, pull! So they're pulling again, and he's inching, and I'm tucking and shoving and wiggling. And we get to here. And now I'm doing the same thing. And they said later that that was the most horrific sound they'd ever heard in their life. And about the time we got him to move another couple inches, apparently his head came out of the rocks. And they saw him. And they both panicked and took off.
It's like the scene from Jaws.
Exactly. So I'm in there, I don't know they're gone, and I'm pushing and I'm kicking. Now I got two little LP50s, I'm at about 80 something feet. And I've been in there a really long time, and I'm getting really low on gas.
And this guy's plugging up the exit.
Well, I had another exit up here.
Okay.
And Bill Reniker used to call that a buddy plug. Never have a buddy plugging the entrance for you, the exit for you to go home and eat. And so finally I'm getting mad because this guy's not moving, and I'm about worn out. And I grab my regulator and I get to that little crack. I go, fuck, Paul! Hello? And then I realize, oh shit, they left me. So I just can't give up. So I just kept going, and I'm kicking and wiggling and cussing up a storm. I'm not a happy camper. And finally, I only got him like another 2 inches, and boom, he popped through the other side, and he just fell on the ground on the other side. And I'm like, I just need to get out of here. And then I realized I don't want to come back. So I went over and I grabbed his BC, and I found his fins, and I found his headlight. I gather all this crap up, and I'm throwing shit through the hole. And then I got to take my gear off, and I wiggle through the hole. I get out. Now I got a reel to contend with, and all this gear, and a body. And finally, I'm frustrated and mad. I threw it all on the floor, and I grabbed the victim. And I thought, well, if I'm taking one thing, I'm taking him. And so out we went. And there's a lot of flow, and I've got decompression to do. So I took the harness that's still on him, and I threw it, and it went right to the surface with the flow. And I'm like, why are they not grabbing this guy? They got to see bubbles. They got to see that we're in here. And nothing. So I'm just hanging onto the body, checking and decompressing, and all of a sudden, whoop, I start going up. Well, they saw the thing, and they started pulling him in. So I let go of him, went down, finished decompressing, got up, got him out. Then I told them, I said, you guys are going to have to go in and get that crap out. I said, I'm not going back in there, I'm done. So they gave me, the sheriff's department, there was a bunch of us out there. and they only had one airboat, so they had to shuttle in multiple trips. And the sheriff said, I'm taking Ed and the victim out first. He said, the reporters are all there. They're going to want to see the body coming back. So one of the things that we're trained to do as IUCR divers is not talk to media. We work for the sheriff's department, essentially. We're just a tool for them. So if anybody asks a question, we just point them to the nearest guy with a gun and a badge. So I get there, and of course there's police tape everywhere, and the family's there, and the reporters are there. And the sheriff comes up and says, the dad wants to shake your hand. Is that okay? I said, absolutely. I have a strict rule that I don't talk to anybody before a body recovery dive or a rescue, because family members, they're always crying and they get in your head, you know, oh, get my son, whatever. So I make sure there's police lines and nobody can get near me. Once it's over, I don't have a problem talking with the family. So I'm talking to the dad, and he's shaking my hand, thanking me for bringing his son home so he could have a burial, because he heard all the stories that they were going to blow it up, they were going to leave him in there, they're going to wait and bring him out in body parts. And, you know, as a dad, he's got to be horrified. So he's thanking me for bringing his son home, that they can have closure. And then this reporter comes over and starts, I got, you know, can I do an interview? And I said, absolutely not. I said, that guy right over there, he's in charge, you go talk to him. So they went over there, and then sheriff said, I don't know what happened, go ask him. So the sheriff came back and he said, yeah, you're cool, just go ahead and talk. So I did. But anyway, apparently after that, then it became, if it's impossible, call Ed. So, and that's how the whole Dominican thing happened as well. So that's the backstory.
That is a good backstory.
Hey everyone! Thanks for watching our latest episode all the way to the end. Hit that subscribe button now so you won't miss our next episode.